I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd have a life-changing conversation while sitting on a bunk bed in boxers and a t-shirt at 2 in the morning. But here we are. Let me back up and explain how I got here, because this story doesn't start where you think it does. My name is Cameron, and 3 months ago I moved into the dorms at State for my sophomore year. I'd specifically requested a single room. After freshman year with a roommate who treated personal space like a suggestion and hygiene like an optional hobby, I was done with sharing my living space. But the housing office screwed up, as they do, and I got assigned to a double with someone named Miles Bennett. Great. Just great. I showed up on move-in day with my dad's truck full of boxes, already mentally preparing myself for another year of diplomatic negotiations over whose turn it was to take out the trash. I was hauling my first load up the stairs when I saw him for the first time. Miles was standing in our doorway, holding one end of a futon while his mum held the other, both of them laughing about something. He had this smile that kind of lit up the whole hallway, and when he turned and saw me struggling with 3 boxes stacked too high to see over, he immediately set down his end of the futon and jogged over. "Here, let me help you with that," he said, taking the top 2 boxes before I could even protest. "I'm Miles. Looks like we're roommates." "Cameron," I managed to say, following him into what would be our shared space for the next 9 months. And that was it. That was the moment my carefully planned, drama-free sophomore year started to unravel. The thing about Miles is that he's just inherently likable. Within the first week, I learned that he's a morning person who somehow doesn't make that annoying, that he's studying environmental science because he genuinely wants to save the world, and that he has this habit of humming while he does homework. Not loud enough to be disruptive, just this soft background melody that somehow made the room feel less lonely. We fell into a routine pretty quickly. He'd wake up at 6:30 for his morning run, moving quietly around the room in the dark, while I pretended to still be asleep. I'd hear the soft rustle of his running clothes, the zip of his jacket, the careful click of the door closing behind him. Then I'd lie there in the dark, fully awake, thinking about absolutely nothing important until my alarm went off at 7:15. We'd both be back in the room around 4 most days, him from lab work, me from my shift at the campus library. He'd sprawl on his bed with his textbooks, I'd sit at my desk with my laptop, and we'd exist in this comfortable silence that felt rare and valuable. Sometimes he'd read passages out loud from whatever he was studying, not really asking for my input, just sharing information he found interesting. "Did you know that a single tree can absorb up to 48 pounds of carbon dioxide per year?" he'd say, his voice full of genuine wonder. And I'd find myself smiling at my screen, not at the fact, but at his enthusiasm. It was fine. Everything was fine. We were good roommates, becoming decent friends, and I was handling it all with perfect maturity and emotional distance. Then October happened. We'd been living together for about 6 weeks when Miles invited me to come to a party with him and some friends from his biology class. I'm not really a party person. I'm more of a stay in my room and rewatch comfort shows kind of person. But he asked in this casual way that somehow made it seem like it would actually matter to him if I came, so I said yes. The party was exactly what you'd expect. Too many people in too small an apartment, music too loud for conversation, the sticky floor situation that every college party seems to require. I was standing in the kitchen, holding a beer I wasn't drinking, wondering how long I needed to stay before I could leave without being rude, when Miles found me. He was slightly tipsy, his cheeks flushed and his hair messy from dancing, and he threw his arm around my shoulders like we'd been best friends for years instead of roommates for 6 weeks. "You okay?" he asked, leaning in close so I could hear him over the music. "You look like you're planning your escape route." I laughed because he wasn't wrong. "Maybe a little," I admitted. He studied my face for a second, then nodded toward the door. "Want to get out of here? There's a diner down the street that makes incredible French fries." We left the party and walked 3 blocks to a 24-hour diner that smelled like coffee and grease and felt like the opposite of the chaos we'd just escaped. We slid into a booth, ordered fries and milkshakes, and talked for 2 hours. Really talked. Not roommate small talk, but actual conversation about real things. He told me about growing up in a small town in Oregon, about how his parents wanted him to take over the family hardware store, but he knew he needed to do something bigger. I told him about my older sister who was perfect at everything, about the pressure of trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life when everyone else seemed to have it all planned out. At some point during that conversation, while he was laughing at something I'd said and stealing fries off my plate even though he had his own, I felt something shift inside my chest. It wasn't dramatic. There were no fireworks or sudden realizations. It was quieter than that, more like a door opening somewhere inside me, letting in light I didn't know I'd been missing. I went to bed that night and stared at the bottom of his bunk above me, listening to his breathing even out as he fell asleep. And I thought, oh no. Because here's the thing I haven't mentioned yet. I'd been so focused on not wanting a roommate, on maintaining my space and my privacy, that I hadn't really examined why I was so determined to keep people at a distance. I'd had exactly one relationship in my entire life, a girlfriend named Emma during senior year of high school. It lasted 3 months and ended with her telling me that she felt like I was never really present, like I was always somewhere else in my head. She wasn't mean about it. She was actually pretty kind, which somehow made it worse. I think you need to figure some things out, she'd said, and I'd agreed because she was right, even though I didn't know what things she meant. Except now, lying in the dark and hyper-aware of Miles sleeping 6 feet above me, I was starting to understand. The next few weeks were an exercise in denial and self-deception. I threw myself into schoolwork, picked up extra shifts at the library, and tried very hard not to notice the way Miles's eyes crinkled when he smiled, or how he had this unconscious habit of biting his lower lip when he was concentrating. I was doing great at the whole not noticing thing right up until the night he came back from the gym and walked into our room shirtless, using his t-shirt to wipe sweat from his face, and I had to pretend to be deeply fascinated by my chemistry textbook while my brain completely short-circuited. He noticed something was off. Of course he noticed. Miles was perceptive in a way that made it hard to hide anything from him. "You've been weird lately," he said one evening while we were both doing homework. "Did I do something?" "No," I said too quickly. "I'm just stressed about midterms." He accepted that explanation, but I could tell he didn't quite believe it. Things felt slightly strained between us after that. This new awkwardness that hadn't existed before. I hated it. I hated that my inability to deal with my own feelings was affecting our friendship. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday in early November, cold enough that we'd both gone to bed early, him in the top bunk, me in the bottom. I was almost asleep when I heard him shift above me. "Cameron," he said quietly. "You awake?" "Yeah," I answered, my voice rough. "What's up?" There was a pause, long enough that I thought maybe he'd changed his mind about whatever he was going to say. Then I heard him climbing down from his bunk. He sat on the edge of my bed, and even in the dark I could make out his silhouette. "Can I ask you something personal?" My heart started beating faster. "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual. Another pause. "Have you ever been in love?" I wasn't expecting that question. I thought about lying, about giving some easy answer that wouldn't reveal anything real, but something about the darkness, about the vulnerability in his voice, made me honest. "I don't think so," I said. "I had a girlfriend in high school, but it didn't feel like what people describe when they talk about love." "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. "I broke up with someone before I came here," he said. "We'd been together for almost a year, and I thought it was serious. But then I got here, and I just felt this sense of relief, you know? Like I'd been playing a part, and I finally got to stop. I understood that feeling more than he knew." "What part were you playing?" I asked. "The part of someone who had it all figured out," he said. "The part of someone who knew what they wanted." He laughed, but it sounded sad. "The truth is, I don't think I've ever let myself really want anything. I've been so busy being what other people expected that I never stopped to ask what I actually felt." We talked for hours that night, both of us sitting on my bed in the dark, sharing things we'd never said out loud before. He told me about the pressure he felt from his parents, about his fear that he'd disappoint everyone who believed in him. I told him about feeling like an imposter in my own life, about always being afraid that people would figure out I didn't belong. At some point, I'm not sure when, we'd shifted closer together. Our shoulders were touching, then our knees. The conversation had moved from deep confessions to lighter topics, favorite movies and worst first day of school stories. But the intimacy remained. I was acutely aware of every point where our bodies made contact, of the warmth of him next to me. "Cameron," he said, his voice different now, softer. "Can I tell you something?" "Always," I said. "I think I've been lying to myself about something," he said. "And I think you might be lying to yourself about the same thing." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" He turned to look at me, and even in the dark I could feel the weight of his gaze. "I think you know," he said quietly. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. I did know, of course I knew. But knowing something and being brave enough to acknowledge it are two very different things. "I'm scared," I whispered. "Me too," he said. He reached out and found my hand in the dark, lacing our fingers together. "But maybe we could be scared together." "I don't know how to do this," I said. "I don't know if I'm ready." "That's okay," he said. "We don't have to figure it all out tonight. We don't have to figure it all out ever if you don't want to. I just needed you to know that I see you. Really see you. And I think you see me too." He was right. I did see him. I saw the way he cared about things deeply, the way he tried to make everyone around him feel comfortable, the way he was brave enough to be vulnerable even when it was terrifying. And somehow, impossibly, he saw me too. Not the version of myself I tried to present to the world, but the real me, with all my doubts and fears and unspoken truths. We sat there for a long time, hands linked, not saying anything. Eventually, he squeezed my hand gently and stood up. "I should let you sleep," he said. "But Cameron, I'm not going anywhere. We can take this as slow as you need." He climbed back up to his bunk, and I lay there in the dark, my hand still warm from his touch, feeling like my entire world had shifted on its axis. The next few days were strange in the best possible way. Nothing had really changed on the surface. We still had the same routine, still did homework in comfortable silence, still grabbed dinner together at the dining hall, but underneath it all, there was this new current of awareness, of possibility. We didn't talk about what had happened that night. I think we both needed time to process it, to figure out what it meant. But there were small moments that felt different now. His hand brushing against mine when we both reached for the salt. The way he'd smile at me across the room when something reminded him of an inside joke. The comfortable weight of his leg pressed against mine when we sat on his bed watching movies on his laptop. I spent a lot of time thinking during those days about Emma and why that relationship had felt like wearing someone else's clothes. About all the times I'd caught myself noticing guys in a way I'd convinced myself was just admiration or wanting to be friends. About the careful distance I'd kept from everyone, afraid they'd see something in me I wasn't ready to acknowledge. It was terrifying, this slow realization that everything I'd believed about myself was being rewritten, but it was also weirdly liberating. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and was finally being given permission to exhale. A week after our late-night conversation, Miles asked if I wanted to go for a walk with him. It was late afternoon, the sun already setting because November does that, and the campus was mostly empty. We walked without a destination, just moving through the cold air, her breath visible in little clouds. "How are you doing?" he asked after a while. "With everything?" "I'm okay," I said, and I meant it. "Still figuring things out, but okay." He nodded. "I've been thinking a lot too," he said, "about what I want, what feels right." He glanced at me, then away. "I don't want to push you into anything you're not ready for. But I also don't want to pretend I don't feel what I feel." "What do you feel?" I asked quietly. He stopped walking and turned to face me. We were standing under one of the big oak trees near the library, the last light of day filtering through the bare branches. "Like I've been waiting my whole life to meet someone who makes me want to be honest," he said. "Like I finally understand what everyone means when they talk about connection." I felt tears prick at my eyes, which was embarrassing, but also somehow fitting. "I feel that too," I said. "It scares me how much I feel it." He smiled, and there was so much warmth in it that I felt something loosen in my chest. "That's okay," he said. "We can be scared. We can take our time. There's no rush." We started walking again, and this time, when his hand brushed against mine, I let my fingers catch his. We walked back to the dorm holding hands, and it felt like the bravest thing I'd ever done. That night, we talked again. Really talked about everything we'd been avoiding. I told him about Emma, about the years of convincing myself I just hadn't met the right girl yet. He told me about his ex-girlfriend, about how he'd cared about her, but had always felt like something essential was missing. We talked about fear and shame, and the weight of expectations, about the terror of disappointing people we loved. And then, sitting cross-legged on his bed facing each other, he asked me the question that became the title of this story. "What are you saving yourself for, Cameron?" I didn't understand at first. "What do you mean?" "You're holding back," he said gently. "From life, from connection, from letting yourself want things. What are you saving yourself for? What are you waiting for?" I opened my mouth to answer and found I didn't have one. What was I waiting for? Permission? The perfect moment? Some guarantee that I wouldn't get hurt or make a mistake? "I'm scared of getting it wrong," I finally said. "Of choosing wrong, being wrong." "But what if there is no wrong?" he asked. "What if there's just being honest about who you are and what you feel? What if the only mistake is never letting yourself try?" He reached out and took both my hands in his. "I'm not asking you to have everything figured out," he said. "I'm just asking if you're willing to try. With me. To see what this could be." I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the hope and fear mixed together in his expression, at the vulnerability it took to ask that question. And I realized that I'd been so focused on the risk of getting hurt that I'd forgotten there was also risk in never trying at all. "Yes," I said. "I want to try." He smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "Yeah." "Yeah," I said, and I was smiling too, feeling something bright and terrifying and wonderful expanding in my chest. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and the fact that he asked, that he gave me the choice, made me want it even more. "Please," I whispered. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to change my mind, and then his lips were on mine and everything else disappeared. It was soft and careful and perfect, and when we pulled apart, we were both grinning like idiots. That was my first kiss with a guy, but it wasn't my first kiss that mattered. It was my first kiss that felt right. My first kiss where I wasn't performing or pretending or trying to feel something I thought I should feel. It was just real and honest and true. We took things slowly after that. We didn't tell everyone immediately. We spent a lot of time just being together, figuring out what we meant to each other without the pressure of labels or definitions. We'd study together with his leg pressed against mine. We'd watch movies with his head on my shoulder. We'd talk late into the night about our fears and hopes and dreams. Gradually, I started telling people. First my sister, who listened to my nervous rambling and then said she'd been wondering when I'd figure it out. Then a few close friends who were universally supportive. My parents were harder. They didn't reject me, but they needed time to adjust their expectations. That was okay. I was still adjusting my own. Miles was patient through all of it. He never pushed me to move faster than I was ready for, never made me feel bad for needing time. He just stayed, constant and caring, showing me every day that I was worth the wait. It's been 4 months now since that first late-night conversation. We're still roommates, but we're also partners in this strange and wonderful journey of figuring out who we are and what we want. We're still learning, still growing, still scared sometimes, but we're doing it together. Last week, we were lying in my bunk together, his arms around me, and he asked if I regretted anything, taking so long to figure things out, being scared, any of it. I thought about it for a moment. No, I said, because everything I went through led me here. To you, to this. He kissed the top of my head. What are you saving yourself for now? He asked, echoing that question from months ago. I smiled. Nothing, I said. I'm done saving myself. I'm ready to just live. And I meant it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for permission or the perfect moment or a guarantee that everything would work out. I was just here, present, honest about who I was and what I felt. It was terrifying and liberating and absolutely right. I don't know what the future holds for Miles and me. Maybe we'll be together forever. Maybe this is just one chapter in both our stories. But what I do know is that he taught me the most important lesson I've ever learned. That the only thing worth saving yourself for is the courage to be honest. The courage to be seen. The courage to want what you want without apology or shame. So if you're out there, holding back, waiting for the perfect moment or the right person or the guarantee that you won't get hurt, let me tell you what my bunkmate taught me. Stop saving yourself. Stop waiting. The moment you're waiting for is right now. The person you're waiting to become is who you already are. You just have to be brave enough to let yourself be seen. And yeah, it's scary. It's terrifying, actually. But it's also the only way to really live, to really connect, to really love. I'm Cameron, and this is the story of how my bunkmate asked me what I was saving myself for and how that question changed my life. Thanks for listening.